In the 1990s, a peaceful area of Eastern Ireland transformed into a place of unspeakable tragedy. This region, covering parts of Dublin, Kildare, Meath and Wicklow, became the backdrop for one of Ireland's most haunting mysteries. Between 1993 and 1998, 8 women disappeared, leaving behind a legacy of fear, sorrow and unanswered questions. The media dubbed it the Vanishing Triangle. But this story isn't about a place. It's about the people lost there, the families left in anguish, and the secrets that still lie hidden in those hills. Who were these women, and what happened to them? Imagine a region about 80 miles in radius, dotted with quiet towns, scenic villages, and forested hills. A place that many considered tranquil and safe. But in the 1990s, a sense of dread took over as more and more women vanished without a trace. Each disappearance left families devastated, the public alarmed, and the authorities baffled. The term Vanishing Triangle was coined by the media, but for the families of these women, it was far more than a geographic label. It became a symbol of fear and unanswered questions. Was there a serial killer on the loose? Could a human trafficking ring be operating in the area? Or was something else lurking in these quiet landscapes? The story of the Vanishing Triangle begins with 26-year-old Annie McCarrick. An American student studying in Dublin, Annie was known for her love of Ireland and her adventurous spirit. On March 26, 1993, she left her apartment, reportedly planning to hike in the Wicklow Mountains, a scenic and somewhat remote area just outside the city. She was last seen boarding a bus to Enniskerry, where she had planned to enjoy the fresh mountain air. Witnesses claim to have seen her at Johnny Fox's pub later that evening, talking with an unidentified man. Annie's parents flew to Ireland after hearing the news, desperate for answers. They organized search parties, spoke to anyone who might have information, and worked tirelessly with local authorities. But the police had little to go on. Despite extensive search efforts in the mountains, forests, and rivers around Enniskerry, Annie's trail went cold. She became the first missing woman in what would later be called the Vanishing Triangle, but her case remained an isolated mystery for several months. Just a few months later, the unthinkable happened again. In July 1993, 39-year-old Eva Brennan disappeared after having lunch with her family in Dublin. Known for her independence and resilience, Eva had told her family she'd return to her apartment after their lunch. When her family didn't hear from her, they began to worry. They decided to check her apartment and were alarmed to find her belongings left behind, as if she had simply stepped out for a moment. Days passed with no sign of Eva, and her family pushed the authorities to treat her case as urgent. However, her case wasn't initially handled with the urgency that missing person cases demand. Her family later criticized the initial police response, which they felt was too slow and lacking in intensity. Like many cases at the time, there was an assumption that an adult might have simply chosen to leave temporarily. By the time her case was taken seriously, valuable days had passed, and the investigation lost its early momentum. This delay, combined with a lack of evidence, left Eva's disappearance as unsolved as Annie's. Imelda Keenan was just 22 when she vanished from Waterford City on January 3, 1994. It was a bright, ordinary afternoon when she told her boyfriend she was going to the post office. She walked through the bustling streets, and a local pharmacist was the last person to see her walking along Lombard Street. The post office was just a short walk away, yet Imelda never arrived. Her boyfriend grew increasingly worried when she didn't return. He called the police, who launched an investigation, interviewing anyone who might have seen her that day. Despite the crowded street, there were no leads and no eyewitnesses who remembered seeing anything unusual. Her family launched their own search efforts, canvassing the city, distributing flyers, and appealing to the media for help. But there was no sign of Imelda, no belongings left behind, and no evidence of a struggle. Her disappearance seemed to defy all explanation. How could someone vanish in broad daylight with no one noticing? Her case underscored a troubling theme in the Vanishing Triangle. Each disappearance happened in seemingly ordinary settings, without a trace. In November 1995, Jojo Dollard, a 21-year-old with a warm personality and a big heart, became the next to disappear. Known as Jovial Jojo by her friends, she was on her way home to Callan, Kilkenny after a trip to Dublin. Jojo was hitchhiking, which was common practice in Ireland at the time. She was last seen making a phone call from a booth in the village of Moon, where she told a friend she was nearly home. Jojo mentioned a man who offered her a lift, and her friend sensed no alarm in her voice. But that call would be the last anyone would hear from her. Witnesses later reported seeing Jojo near the phone booth, possibly speaking with a man. Authorities launched a search, combing through the surrounding area and interviewing potential witnesses. The case deeply affected her family, who spoke publicly about their heartbreak and frustration. They, like the other families, started to wonder if these cases might be connected. A pattern was emerging: young women, all last seen alone, disappearing without a trace. And for Jojo's family, it was becoming harder to dismiss the possibility of foul play. In August 1996, another young woman went missing, this time under particularly heartbreaking circumstances. Fiona Pender, a 25-year-old expecting her first child, vanished from her apartment in Tullamore, County Offaly. Fiona was a beloved daughter and sister, and her pregnancy added to her family's grief. She was 7 months along, with her baby due in just a few weeks. Her mother described her as vibrant and full of life, and her family struggled to understand how she could have simply disappeared. Fiona's case shook the community, who joined her family in their search efforts. The police searched Fiona's apartment, looking for any clue that might point to what happened. But once again, there was no evidence of foul play or any indication that she'd planned to leave. As her family put up posters and organized vigils, their heartbreak only deepened as each day passed without answers. For Fiona's family, the pain of losing both a daughter and an unborn grandchild was indescribable. In February 1997, 17-year-old Ciara Breen disappeared from her home in Dundalk. She was last seen around midnight, and the following morning, her mother discovered her missing. Ciara's case was particularly difficult for her mother, who struggled with the possibility that her daughter had left the house voluntarily, only to meet with tragedy. The police and family launched a search, but Ciara had left no clues, no notes, and no indication of where she might have gone. Just a year later, in 1998, 19-year-old Fiona Sinnott vanished after leaving a pub in County Wexford. She'd been seen with friends that night, and her belongings were later found in her home, suggesting she had planned to return. Fiona was a young mother with a young child, making her disappearance even more tragic. Her family described her as kind and deeply devoted to her child, and they have continued to search for answers for decades. Both Ciara and Fiona's cases added to the growing list of missing women in the Vanishing Triangle. The last confirmed victim associated with the Vanishing Triangle was 18-year-old Deirdre Jacob, who disappeared in July 1998. Deirdre was last seen walking toward her home in Newbridge, County Kildare. CCTV footage showed her walking along a familiar road, but after that, there was no further trace of her. The police launched a thorough investigation, questioning locals and reviewing footage, but no solid leads emerged. In 2018, authorities reclassified Deirdre's case as a murder inquiry, suggesting that new evidence might have surfaced. However, no further details were released, and no arrests have been made. Her family has continued to search for answers, organizing vigils and keeping Deirdre's memory alive. For them, as with the other families, each year without answers feels like an eternity. As the disappearances continued, one name began to emerge in connection with the Vanishing Triangle: Larry Murphy. A convicted rapist and violent offender from the area, Murphy's crimes horrified the nation. In 2000, he was arrested for abducting, assaulting, and nearly killing a young woman in the Wicklow Mountains. The chilling details of his attack led investigators to question whether he could have been involved in the other disappearances. Murphy was known for his violent tendencies, and his behavior fit certain profiles associated with serial offenders. Criminologists speculated that he had the skill and cunning to evade capture. However, despite similarities between Murphy's known crimes and the Vanishing Triangle cases, no concrete evidence has been found linking him to the missing women. After serving his sentence, he left Ireland, moving across Europe, where he's managed to avoid further scrutiny. Yet for many, he remains the most likely suspect, a shadow hanging over the mystery of the Vanishing Triangle. Larry Murphy was born in 1966 in Baltinglass, County Wicklow, Ireland. His early years and family life were reportedly unremarkable, and according to some accounts, Murphy had a relatively normal upbringing with no significant signs of the violent tendencies that would later become apparent. He attended school in the area, though little is publicly known about his education or activities during his formative years. He was known as a carpenter and worked as a self-employed builder. His skills in carpentry helped him earn a living, and he worked on various construction and repair projects. To his neighbors and community, Murphy came across as reserved, but otherwise unremarkable. Larry Murphy was married and had 2 children. His wife filed for divorce soon after his arrest, wanting to sever any ties due to the nature of his crimes. Murphy's children have remained out of the public eye, largely due to privacy concerns and the intense media attention surrounding their father's crimes. The family has made efforts to maintain their privacy and move on from the association with Murphy, whose actions led to immense social and emotional consequences for them. Murphy's life, from his relatively obscure early years to his horrific crimes and subsequent societal exile, has made him a lasting figure in discussions surrounding Ireland's missing persons cases. Despite ongoing suspicions, no concrete evidence has linked him to the Vanishing Triangle cases, though he remained a person of interest to this day. The Vanishing Triangle left a mark on Ireland that endures to this day. The disappearances changed how missing persons cases are handled, prompting the Irish government to reform investigation protocols and increase funding for cold case units. For the public, the cases ignited debates about personal safety, especially for women traveling alone. Stories of the missing women became a focal point for discussions on how law enforcement could improve their response times and investigative techniques. Families of the victims became activists, pushing for more support and resources for missing persons investigations. Their stories resonated with the public, leading to widespread empathy and calls for justice. The fear of a possible serial killer or human trafficker in Ireland's heartland has left communities wary and more vigilant. In recent years, Ireland's Gardaí established a cold case unit, bringing renewed attention to the Vanishing Triangle. Using advanced forensic techniques like DNA analysis, digital mapping, and international cooperation, investigators are re-examining evidence in each case. Authorities have even consulted experts in behavioral profiling, hoping to narrow down potential suspects based on criminal patterns. The new technologies offer hope, but for the families, it's a painful reminder of the years lost without answers. They continue to speak publicly, organizing vigils and keeping the memory of these women alive. They hope that with new tools and more attention, the truth about what happened to their loved ones will finally come to light. The Vanishing Triangle remains one of Ireland's most enduring mysteries. Each missing woman represents a life cut short, a family left without closure, and a question that still haunts the Irish landscape. As new leads emerge, the possibility of answers grows. But until then, the Vanishing Triangle reminds us that justice, however delayed, is worth pursuing. For the families, the pain endures, but so does the hope that someday they will know the truth. And Ireland remains haunted by a question that refuses to fade. What happened to the women of the Vanishing Triangle? As of November 2024, a major breakthrough has rekindled hope in the search for answers in the Vanishing Triangle cases. A recently re-evaluated DNA sample from one of the scenes has led Gardaí to re-examine previously discounted persons of interest. In addition, a new eyewitness account has surfaced, placing a suspicious vehicle near the last known location of one of the missing women. The Gardaí have announced plans to use advanced DNA genealogy technology, similar to methods used in high-profile cold cases internationally, to trace any possible familial links connected to the unknown DNA. For the families, this latest development offers a glimmer of hope and a renewed sense that the truth may soon emerge, providing long-awaited closure for the women of the Vanishing Triangle and their loved ones. Please subscribe for more videos.